Django Unchained is a new film starring Jamie Foxx and Christoph Waltz. The film is set in 1858 and stars Foxx as a slave. The movie is based on a true story. Schultz offers to buy Django, but his polite and educated manner rubs the ill-mannered Specs the wrong way. Ace Speck threatens to shoot him with his shotgun. In response, Schultz lowers his lantern, whips out a revolver, and shoots Ace, then Dickie's horse, spilling its owner on the ground. Django takes Ace's boots and clothes and mounts Ace's horse. Schultz frees the remaining slaves and says they may either carry the remaining Speck brother back to town, or shoot him and flee. As Django and Schultz ride off, we hear Speck pleading for his life. We hear a gunshot and can see blood splatter as Dickie's brains are blown out. Django and Schultz arrive in the small town of Daughtry near El Paso. As they travel through the streets, townspeople stop to stare in disbelief at the sight of a black man on a horse. Schultz pours beers for himself and Django and leaves money on the bar. He explains that he is no longer a dentist, but a bounty hunter in search of the Brittle brothers who are wanted dead or alive. He admits that although he knows the general location of the brothers, near Gatlinburg, they have adopted aliases. The sheriff enters the saloon, shotgun in hand, and tells Schultz and Django to leave. Schultz is silent, then steps forward. A spring-mounted derringer pops up in his right hand. The sheriff stumbles to the ground, moaning in pain. The town marshal and most of the town arrive and train rifles on the front door of the saloon. Schultz hears that he has 100 rifles aimed at his head, and gets the marshal to agree to not have him shot dead like a dog in the street when he comes out. Schultz then exits, hands raised over his head and a paper in his hand. He announces that the dead man the people of Daughtry elected their sheriff, who went by the name of Bill Sharp, is a wanted cattle rustler. Django wants to buy freedom for his wife, a slave girl named Broomhilda von Schaft. Their owner Carrican, Bruce Dern, was a cruel old man who disapproved of their marriage. Django is to play act as a freed slave who has been hired as Schultz's valet. They arrive at the plantation owned by Spencer Big Daddy Bennett, Don Johnson. Django is given free range to look around the estate. Django asks Bettina, his escort, if she knows of the Brittles. Bettina admits that she doesn't know them, leading Django to suspect that the Brits are using a false name. At this, Bettina reveals that 3 overseer brothers known as the Schaefers did arrive in the past year. She points out the first one in the field. Django looks through his telescope and sees that it is Ellis. Django learns that Big John and Little Rog are about to whip a young slave girl for breaking eggs. He shoots Big John through a Bible page glued to his shirt. Little Rog attempts to grab his revolver, but Django grabs Big John's whip and uses it to viciously flog him. Bennett calls out all the fellow white men of the plantation to kill Django and Schultz, spotting their dentist cart camped outside of town. The men make their charge over the hill in KKK-style hoods, and surround the small campsite. Django and Schultz hide in a tree a short distance away, Schultz carrying a rifle. As they surround the cart, one of the men spots what he thinks is Django and Schultz hiding under the cart. He peeks under, only to find that the bodies are actually bedrolls. Django Unchained is the first film in the Django Unchained series. The film is based on a German legend about the love between Siegfried and Brunhilde. The story is about a woman who is captured and imprisoned by a dragon. King trains Django to not only be an expert with a gun, but also how to read and present himself in public. Django and King perch themselves on a hill overlooking a small farm where Django hesitates to kill a man who is now peacefully working on the farm and has a son. King explains that it is this own man's actions in a dirty world that has brought the bounty hunters to his door. Broomhilda was sold to Calvin Candy. Leonardo DiCaprio, the owner of a plantation known as Candyland. Candy is famous for breeding Mandingo slaves who are bred to fight each other to the death, bare knuckle, for their owner's amusement. King says that he will pose as a wealthy European who seeks to purchase one of Candy's Mandingos to take to fight in Europe. Django and King meet Candy's lawyer, Leonid Mogi, Dennis Christopher, who explains that Candy is obsessed with French culture. The two are brought upstairs where they watch a Mandingo fight, which is very brutal and fatal for the loser. Django is incredibly offensive to Candy and his guests, talking back to all the white men. Django continues to act defiantly, insulting both slave and white man alike. Candy states that he believes 1 in 10,000 black men are exceptional, and believes Django to be one of those rare few. D'Artagnan is named by Candy after the hero from The Three Musketeers, a book written by Frenchman Alexandre Dumas. Candy states that his slaves can't retire from fighting until they have won at least 5 matches in order for him to recoup his $500 investment. Django is freed and rides on a horse into the estate along with his master and other white men. They all meet Candy's widowed older sister Laura Lee, Laura Cayouette, and his loyal, 76-year-old house slave and foreman trustee Stephen. Stephen informs Candy that while he was gone, Broomhilda also attempted to escape and is now locked in the hot box, a metal pit in Candy's field. Though he's enraged at seeing his wife dragged from the hot box, Django checks his temper. Schultz says he wants to meet Broomhilda, saying he heard legend of her German-speaking abilities. When Broomhilda is brought to Schultz's room, the doctor explains to her that he and his friend are here to rescue her. He then signals Django to come into his room, and Broomhilda faints with happiness upon seeing her husband. Broomhilda serves candy and has many guests, including Schultz and Django. Lara notes that Broomhilda seems to be attracted to Django. This piques Steven's curiosity and he begins to interrogate her. Schultz offers to buy Candy's third best mandingo for $12,000. They agree that Schultz will return to the estate in 5 days with a lawyer to complete the transaction. Candy is clearly thrilled at this windfall. Steven tells Candy that Django and Broomhilda know each other and that Schultz and Django intend to buy her, leave the property, and never return for the mandingo. Candy is incensed and returns to the dining room with a small bag containing the skull of an old slave of his plantation, Ben. He then explains that he collects the skulls of his dead slaves and, invoking the pseudoscience of phrenology, has determined that the reason they don't rise up and kill their masters, despite easily outnumbering the whites, is that their brains are predisposed to subservience. Schultz pays the $12,000 and Candy has his lawyer, Leonide Mogi, begin drawing up the papers transferring ownership of Broomhilda to King. The papers are signed, but before they leave, King insults Candy's intelligence, noting how especially stupid Candy is. Stephen King is shot dead by Candy in the movie Django Unchained. Candy was trying to humiliate Schultz by refusing to shake his hand. Butch Pooch, Candy's bodyguard, fires his shotgun. All hell breaks loose as Django grabs the distracted Pooch's revolver and shoots him. Mogi tries to run, screaming for help, but is shot multiple times. Django then is thrown back into the foyer, and a shootout ensues. Blood flies everywhere and bodies fall left, right and center. Django is to be castrated by Billy Crash. Stephen decides to sell him to the LaQuint Dickey Mining Company as a slave. Django will spend the rest of his days as a slave. Quentin Tarantino makes a cameo appearance in the film. The film is based on the novel Django Unchained by the same name. Django is a bounty hunter who kills a man worth $7,000. Django first massacres all of the surviving ranch hands, trackers, who had hunted down the escaped D'Artagnan. He then finds King's dead body in a stable with the freedom papers for Broomhilda still on him. After he takes the papers, Django swears that his next act of vengeance will be in honor of King. Django shoots Billy Crash and the last 2 white ranch hands dead. He then shoots Stephen in both of his kneecaps, stating that, in the 9,999 slaves Stephen has likely betrayed while working for Candy, he has never met one like Django. Django meets his wife, who waits for him with 2 horses outside the estate. Django is destined to become a legend, just as Siegfried before him did. After the end credits, we cut to the slaves Django freed from the mining company transporters. They remain seated where Django left them, still in awe of what they witnessed. Then, one asks what the name of that black man was. Black man was. Black man was. Black man was.